The open world genre has been a staple of video games ever since technology could seamlessly render huge maps. These days, there's been no shortage of open world games, and the genre continues to grow, with developers taking more ambitious takes on the formula. While exploration mostly takes center stage in an open world, there's a lot of fun to be had in games that are quite challenging to master as well. To that effect, here are 15 of the most challenging open world games. Days Gone. Sony Ben's latest open-world outing might not have had a flying reception initially, but many fans have come around to appreciating the better parts of the game with post-launch patches and the recent PC port. Days Gone puts players in the shoes of Deacon as he tries to survive the apocalypse. Players will have to remain cautious about their ammunition and fuel resources at all times. There's also the zombie hordes, which can pummel you down in moments if your gear and skills are not up to the mark. Surviving the world of Days Gone is certainly challenging, but for fans of post-apocalyptic games such as this, the challenge is worth taking. STALKER: Shadow of Chernobyl. GSC Game World's STALKER: Shadow of Chernobyl is a mechanically rich experience with a lot of intertwining systems that make traversing the exclusion zone a hazardous task. Players will have to think tactically before rushing into a combat encounter, since resources such as ammunition and healing supplies are scarce. A number of hideous mutant creatures also roam the exclusion zone, constantly posing a threat to your existence. Surviving in the world of STALKER requires the players to have both their wits and guns with them at all times. The visuals are certainly washed out by today's standards, but the richness of the game's survival aspects still shine as bright as before. Metro Exodus. A spiritual successor to the STALKER games, Metro Exodus takes players to the ravenous wastelands of a post-apocalyptic Russia. There's a huge and varied open world to traverse, all brought magnificently to life with ultra-detailed visuals. The level of care and polish also extends to the gameplay systems too, as a number of hostile elements such as soldiers and mutants will try to pin you down as you try to make do with whatever little resources you have. Surviving the world of Metro Exodus is a brutal task, but it's definitely a rewarding one as well. KENSHI. Lo-Fi Games' debut title KENSHI sees players taking on the role of a leader for a band of characters. Set primarily against the barren deserts and plains, players are free to choose their own paths as they build characters from diverse classes. The open-ended sandbox design gives players a sense of freedom, but it is associated with a newfound sense of challenge too. Enemies can, and at times will, be much stronger than you, and players will have to use everything in their power to make it out alive with their team. Combine this with base building, progression, and faction loyalty systems, KENSHI can be a pretty difficult game to master. Far Cry 2. In Far Cry 2, players are tasked with hunting down an arms dealer who goes by the name of the Jackal, all while the game's world is embroiled in civil war. The gunplay is brutal, with guns constantly jamming and enemies frequently overwhelming the player. There's also the overlying dread of a malaria attack, which makes it one of the most brutal open-world games to date. SUBNAUTICA. Unknown Worlds' underwater survival game SUBNAUTICA sees players uncovering a myriad of secrets of the planet 4546b. The game boasts a beautiful underwater ecosystem with a great variety of flora and fauna, which can be hostile at times. Surviving the world is pretty difficult as players need to keep tabs on a multitude of stats and resources at all times. As you venture deeper into the sea, enemies start to become more hostile, and you will constantly have to keep grinding for better gear to have a shot at survival. Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon Zero Dawn features a number of interesting and methodical fights against several different types of machines that require players to constantly switch up tactics on the fly. Aloy has a pretty sizable arsenal of weapons, and players will have to make the best out of it to have any chance of survival. Players will also have to constantly be on the move, so as to not get cornered by a band of deadly machines. Those looking for an even greater challenge should also try the Frozen Wilds expansion, which features even deadlier and brutal types of enemies. Dying Light. Dying Light can be a pretty manageable experience once players get the hang of the parkour mechanics and a basic understanding of the melee combat loop. However, once night kicks in, a whole host of new enemy types such as the volatiles, walkers, hunters, and bolters appear on the streets. They are more numerous and are deadlier, which makes surviving a constantly challenging experience. That being said, those who do survive the night get handsomely rewarded with survivor points, which can be used to upgrade one's character, making the whole ordeal worthwhile in a way. The Forest. In Night Games' The Forest is an open-world horror game that follows the protagonist's adventures of survival after a deadly plane crash. The lush green forest is home to a bunch of cannibal monsters who will constantly pose a threat to your existence. Your daily affairs consist of gathering resources during the day and then using them to create shelter and defend yourself from the horrendous creatures at night. The survival aspect is brutal, and players can be found scrambling to get a hold of any resources they can find. The Forest was made by a team of just 4 people, but can stand on its own 2 feet when compared against contemporaries with bigger budgets. Outward. Outward might look like a medieval fantasy RPG on the surface, but a rich assortment of well-crafted survival systems help it differentiate itself from the pack. As players venture into the sprawling world of the game, they will have to constantly battle against the constant looming threat of dragons and monsters. You need to keep yourself hydrated, be cautious as to not catch any disease, alongside the usual assortment of stats and resources that one expects from a game of the genre. Survival can be pretty demanding, but it's also an equally rewarding experience. Borderlands 2. Borderlands 2 isn't a difficult game for most of its runtime, as the constant barrage of loot, ammo, and health resources make getting through enemy encounters a manageable challenge. However, once players finish the campaign and start to move towards the endgame raids, Borderlands 2 can become a pretty difficult game. Raids such as the Digistruct Peak require players to have the most exquisite piece of gear to have a chance at survival. That being said, it does fall subject to the bullet sponge bosses that are a common point of criticism of looter shooters in general. Death Stranding. Hideo Kojima's take on his newly created Strand genre might not be everybody's cup of tea, but it is certainly worthwhile for those seeking a challenge. As protagonist Sam Porter, you have to deliver packages across the dilapidated ruins of America. Players will have to scale up treacherous peaks and stumble across different terrains to get to their goal, which requires special equipment. The catch is that in most cases, you have to carry the equipment alongside your packages as well as your arsenal, which makes traveling even more difficult. Valheim. Valheim is a procedurally generated survival game set against a deadly world. Each run drops players into a randomly generated map consisting of several biomes, and players will have to gather resources and craft gear to advance beyond the starting location. There are a number of beasts to defeat, which can get extremely difficult if players aren't well prepared. Of course, failure drops you back to the starting location with all your gear lost. Ark Survival Evolved. Studio Wildcard's survival game drops players into a world where humans and dinosaurs coexist. As you might expect, taking down these hulking beasts with primal weaponry such as bows and spears is no easy feat, although there's a healthy assortment of guns as well. You have to keep tabs on food, water, temperature, and other resources as well, and death means a progress reset. You can also meet and potentially antagonize other players, which also lends another layer of interactive systems to this already complex survival game. Green Hell. Green Hell is a game about surviving the brutal and unforgiving Amazonian rainforest. You can either play solo or co-op with friends, and the game tasks players with surviving the Green Hell as you learn more about how you ended up here in the first place. To survive, you will have to use in-game techniques such as starting fires and tending to both physical and mental conditions. Of course, you will also have to defend yourself from the terrain's wildlife as well as other dangers that lurk in the darkness. It's complex and unforgiving, but is definitely worthwhile for those seeking a challenge. That's all for now. If you enjoy what you saw, please hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, now is a great time to subscribe. We upload brand new videos every single day. After subscribing, don't forget to enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you next time, right here on GamingBolt.